mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. We're down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is on up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is on up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 91's podcast, episode number 77. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous, yes, that's infamous rapper, our resident influencer, and IG star shooting the breeze talking UCF sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, and all the other things like Twitter and X, whatever you call it, and check out the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle, the Big 12 Huddle, and all of the other content that we're putting out. It's a great week this week. We've got some War and I-4 updates. It's not a war anymore, but the Bulls definitely lost, or the Cows, as we call them, lost the battle. We'll be talking a little bit about football. As you can see, I've got our 2017-2018 game-worn special jersey. That's why it's so big on me, because it's an XL and there's no pads underneath. But excited to talk a little bit about new recruits. We'll talk a little bit about the Combine and RJ Harvey's performance specifically. Got some interesting things with the ACC. Their lawsuit is over. So what does that mean for the Big 12? We'll talk a little bit about the football stadium, because the upgrades are moving. We'll talk some UCF hoops and the TC Poo at TCU, Keyshawn Hall's role, Mikey Williams, and obviously the baseball wins. So without further ado, let me bring our illustrious producer, who we were missing last week, Nobra, to the stage. What's up, Nobra?
Hey now.
Are you flipping me off right now?
Oh, whoops, no.
All we were seeing was the middle finger, bro. It got lost in your background. That's awesome. Welcome back to the show, man. We missed you last week. Glad you're here. Let's start with a hair flip and a hey now.
Hey now.
Yeah, we missed that last week. All right. Welcome back to the show. Next to the show, the tallest podcaster in all of UCF sports, Ben Stout. Welcome back to the show. We missed you last week too.
What's up, guys? Yeah, I missed y'all last week as well, and happy to be back with y'all talking UCF sports.
Awesome. Alan Levin will be joining us. He popped in here, popped back out, so I'm sure he'll pop back in here in a moment. But because he's not here, last but not least, but always last, Josh Lazar, remote on location from somewhere near Beantown. Welcome, Josh.
Yeah, pretty close. Hello, world. You're lucky you have me, because I've been up 3 hours. I've had 3 hours of sleep in the last 40 plus hours. I'm not making it through the whole show. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not happening. I'm going to hold out as long as I can. We'll see what happens. I'm excited.
We're always lucky to have you, buddy.
Yeah, I'm trying. I don't know if the audience will be lucky to have you when you start snoozing and then we see Z's going across the keyboard. Yeah, exactly. Make sure you have something to wipe the keyboard off with when you fall asleep during the show. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. Alan will be here momentarily, but let's go ahead and get started and talk a little bit of football, and more specifically, the Combine. So the Combine was this week. UCF had 3 participants this year in the Combine. Of course, the one that we have, we know the most and certainly love is our very own RJ Harvey. He ran a 4.41 or 4.40.
4.40. And you know what? PJ Adams is going to be very sad that you forgot that he was in there. We actually had 4 people at the Combine. BJ Adams didn't do so good, so you might have forgotten about that.
He was forgettable. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I feel bad, but yes.
Yeah, it's it's super exciting. I with RJ having been here as long as he has and being the heartbeat of the team, obviously all eyes are on RJ. We had some other good performers that I think made themselves some money at the combine as well. But RJ just looked, he looked like a beast here, but I think his performance at the combine is going to earn him some bucks. When we were talking about this earlier in the season, we were talking about where do we think RJ is going to land? Him being a running back, the seasons that we've had, etc. I think, honestly, I honestly think he draft. What is that, a 2? You think a second round draft pick?
No.
Draft pick.
Second round.
Okay. Yeah. So, we were talking 5th or 6th round, maybe for RJ. But I think after this think about it. The big part about this, especially with running backs, is running backs don't get moved as high in the draft order anymore. They used to be. It just isn't the case anymore. They have a short shelf life, so teams prefer to invest in other positions. That being said, UCF's performance, especially this past year, didn't help matters either. We talked about, his performance and his numbers versus the other top performers in college football. When you're talking about Genty, when you're talking about some of the other players that he was up against, and he was being undervalued all year because the performance of the team. So I think the combine, specifically his ability to run, he looked massive like he always does. He performed well in his other, not just his run, but his other events that he participated in. So I really think he helped his draft stock considerably in spite of all of those things. And so, I'm really happy for RJ. I would say he at least moved up probably at least a round on draft boards based on his performance. But Josh, why don't you give us a few more details on him and the other members of the Knights team that participated? And you know what? It wasn't that long ago that we were celebrating getting one person into the combine, right? So this is definitely an uplift from the Big 12. But Josh, take it away.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that RJ, let's just go to the runs. He had one of the fastest times among 24 quarterbacks. I think he was 4th out of 4.40, only trailing to Tootin from Virginia Tech, Blue from Texas, who's pretty popular and well-known, and Smith from SMU. And they were, fast, right? But we're talking 4.32, 4.38, and 4.39. So, and he was saying he was hitting 4.3s during practice. So that's a huge deal, right? And he had a top speed of 22.93 miles per hour. That was 5th best of the day total. So he's fast. We all know this. And I'm sure scouts know this. And like you said, it really is, it depends on how the cookie crumbles when it comes to running backs. I feel like it could be a Latavius Murray situation where he gets drafted, where it might be accurate for the time coming out of college, and slowly but surely grinds his way into a spot, definitely on a 53-man roster. I'd be a little shocked if he wasn't on one by the new season. So he's just been doing really well. And even better than that, the social media team, if you've never seen RJ Harvey outside of a uniform, like at a practice, he's shorter dude. He's 5'8". He's shorter than me, but he's also 205, which is lighter than me, and he's like 1,000% muscle. So he's always been humongous as a muscly, bulldozing type of running back. We all see this. Everyone else is seeing this too. So he did really well across the board. If I remember correctly, there's this thing called like the RAS score, the relative athletic score. And
it's not the Riz score.
No. I'm sure
he got a lot of Riz though.
Okay,
yeah,
all right. Making sure.
Yeah. But that RAS score, he ranks somewhere in like 100 out of 2,500 running backs for the last 20, 30 years, something like that level. We all know he's good. the world knows that he's better than just the numbers he put up in a crap year this year. So we have that with RJ, and I hope you're right.
Josh, the other thing about RJ too is like if you watch and these scouts, if they haven't been, they will go back and watch film on him. His ability to read defenses and be patient and then burst. That was his big thing, right? So
100%.
When we were talking, I don't know, a season or two ago, we were talking about Greg McCrae type vibes and his ability to like be patient, hit the right hole, and make something big happen out of maybe something that wasn't. And a lot of what we were running was meant to go between the tackles, right? We were running a lot of power offense between the tackles, and you have to wait for your tackles or your holes to develop, right? And so his ability to read that and to move effectively and be patient, I think are going to be huge, as well as the physical attributes you just mentioned.
I agree. And the other end of this, and BJ Adams sure is a great person, but as a corner prospect, not so great. His vertical broad jump were rated poor by this RAS score. His hand size and height and weight were all right. His speed was okay. He had a 4.53 and his official 40 time, which was 19th out of 24 cornerbacks. His RAS score was ranked, I have this here, 1,408 out of 2,480 cornerbacks from 87 to 25. And it's probably not getting you drafted. Maybe.
UFDA maybe. I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing about him, though. I mean, he had 2 really, really strong seasons, and then he kind of fell off the last 2. So I don't know what's going on there. But his first 2 seasons, I mean, he was one of the cornerbacks that were kind of Revis Island type cornerbacks, where he was one of the few that was, he was always matched up one-on-one with the best receiver. So he did well in slowing down and disrupting routes, but obviously his measurables, when you move up a level and you go to the NFL level, it's the top 0.5% of all of college football that's for competing for spots. The expectations are just that much higher.
Yeah, and if he gets to be an undrafted free agent, maybe he gets to win his way on. Like he has more work to do than, say, RJ, definitely, and probably Kobe. So Kobe Hudson is interesting. He wasn't a burner in the 40 as you kind of would expect, right? He was again another 4.57. It's wasn't great. It was tied 32 out of 35 wideouts, but I didn't expect him to run a 4.3. What he did do, as we all know, it's when he did his positional drills, it was amazing. If you saw some of the videos of this, he caught every ball in the gauntlet, like easily, cleanly, no flinching, just bang, 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 bang through.
Not like the Cows tight end.
No, not the one
took it to the helmet a few times.
Yeah, no doinks off the head. And even better than that, if he had a post where when he had a post that, I don't know if he didn't catch up to it or it was overthrown, but I mean, he was full extension out, kind of near the fingertips, and pulled one in that looked really, really good. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be able to grab the ball right out of the air, and we know he can do that, and he can contort his body into weird shapes to get access to the ball. So I feel like he has a good shot at making it on day 3.
That was one of the digs on him, though, is like he would always have one drop per game where it was like a head shaker, right? Yeah. And so if he did well on all his catching drills, then that's solid, because you guys know that that's what separates receivers that make it in the NFL from converting them to cornerbacks or DBs, right? Is their ability to catch the ball. And he, as good as he was, and especially when he was on the opposite field of Javon Baker, right?
Yeah.
That was one of the things that was a challenge for him is we would look at games and touchdowns. It's not even, and it's just head shakers, not necessarily difficult catches. I mean, not easy catches, but definitely not super difficult catches. And then he would just grab these these passes out of the air that are like, oh, did he just catch that? How did he just do that? Right. But I'm glad that was the results for him, because that was one of the big challenges and knocks on him while he was here at UCF. Still amazing receiver, still very, happy to have had him. Ben, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that that's a category that he needed to prove at the combine. Like Josh said, I don't think that he was known to necessarily be a go route burner at UCF. It's kind of not really what his role was on this team. He wasn't even thought of as one of those types of receivers. That being said, I think it was kind of up and down. Like he would make some, like as you said, Roger, he'd make some amazing catches in the game, but then also some head scratching drops. And so I think those drills were probably the most important to him. And honestly, I don't know much about the process. Obviously, Trey's laid it out on this show before, and it's quite fascinating. But it's a wonder, that why he even ran the 40, considering that he wasn't going to put up a big number anyways, and 4.57 wasn't really impressive. But that being said, I think it shows his competitiveness. I'll tell you a number I was a little bit surprised at is 16 reps for RJ Harvey. I would have thought he could crank out like 50 reps to get an NFL combine running back record or something, just because he looks like the miniature version of the Incredible Hulk out there. When I'm talking about reps, obviously I'm talking about the bench press.
Yeah.
But he's just so jacked out there. But him running it was, I think, in the 40 for RJ, he just got the ability to kind of show off not only his speed, but just, and it might have something to do with his height, but certainly his athleticism and his, his muscles, I guess, in general. But like, he just has such a smooth running style. Like, he's just so fluid the way he runs. And I think that was on display in the 40. And I'm glad he not only put up a good time in that 4.40, that was his second run. His first run was 4.41. So, he was consistently one of the fastest running backs there. And that's really encouraging to see. I think as Josh stated, he improved with that 40 time in particular, but some other things that he did as well. Broad jump. I think even the vertical jump as well. He showed his athleticism, and he improved his draft stock during the combine, which is really at the end of the day all you can really ask for. So it's such an event, and if the NFL is just, they've mastered the kind of 12-month schedule, and it's really cool, as you guys said. I mean, to have multiple people there that are representing UCF and trying to make their way onto an NFL roster and their name called on the NFL draft. And not only do that, but improve kind of their draft stock or draft status is really exciting as a UCF fan. And it's just another thing in our progression of as a program that we should start getting used to, and hopefully we continue to see more and more athletes in this process.
It's important in recruiting too. And it kind of goes back to, the Gus mentality versus being able to, when you're talking about recruiting, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we talk about that segment, but Gus was more, okay, I'm going to plug and play people in here. He wasn't known for the development side of things, right? And so Frost is kind of taking that recruiting approach with the development side of things. So if you're going to sell that message, it's important that you're able to, the more and more of these guys that we get into the draft, the better. I mean, that was Nick Saban's pitch, right? We're not going to pay you NIL the first year, but we're going to put you in the NFL if you make it to a starting position.
And the schools like Georgia. I mean, there's schools that are out there that certainly pay their athletes handsomely, but that's still the foundational message is, a school like Georgia, for instance, isn't they're not Ohio State and Oregon as far as the amount that they pay. They still pay handsomely, but that's their message. We're going to get you into the NFL. But I was going to also say about RJ Harvey that the NFL Combine, I think, did for him is it, just like the Senior Bowl did for him, is it gets him noticed, and it gets NFL personnel to NFL executives to go back and look at his tape. And I think that what they will see when they look at his tape, to your point on the losing season, what they'll find out about UCF, if they didn't know it already, is RJ Harvey is the main focal point of every defensive game plan when you went up against UCF this year. And he still had an incredibly impressive season with, what do we have, 5 or 4 different starting running backs, 5 different starting running backs throughout the course of the year. So, like, I mean, just complete upheaval at that key position of quarterback, and every game consistently RJ Harvey performed in. And so can't say enough about him. Once you go back and look at the tape, I think it only solidifies and improves his draft stock as he gets noticed at an event like the Combine.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Should we talk about our last person that has the shot of getting drafted, which would be sick if we got 4. It's been a while since we had that.
That's incredible.
Yeah, let's talk about Mac McWilliams. And this is interesting because does he count for UAB? Does he count for us? I don't know. But, new era of college football, right? So, he did pretty well this year at UCF. And you might not think that by just hearing names while you're at games, or you maybe tuned out when we were like 4 and 7. But he actually was the highest graded defender per Pro Football Focus, PFF, right? It was pretty good. He had an interception in Sam Houston for what it's worth, and had a career high of 6.5 tackles from loss. When he was at the Combine, he was fast. He was the 9th fastest of the 29 quarterbacks at 4.41. Actually, everyone who was at the Combine ran a sub 4.6, which is impressive. He was fast. His overall his RAS score was great on his splits and the overall model, with his overall height and weight and arm length and all the other pieces of data that NFL coaches and scouts like. So I don't know if he's getting drafted, but he has probably a better shot than he did last weekend. And
Mac McWilliams is an interesting story, right? Because as you said, he was from UAB. He was one of those NIL transfers that we were looking for, and there were high expectations for him because he had a banner year at UAB the year before he came to us. So, and he played well. He played well in the Big 12. He wasn't, he was. I think if he had a couple more years in the Big 12 or in college, it would have been even better, because there is an adjustment from UAB to playing a Big 12 schedule, right? Yeah. And I hate to say that because of all the years we talked about us and, the G5 versus P5 argument at that time, P4 now. But, I think he definitely has a shot. And I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't taken in the 5th or 6th round.
Yeah, I think day 3 is going to be pretty popular. I'm really hoping RJ can get into maybe the 3rd round. It just really depends on if someone's in love with him and enough running backs come off the board. But I feel like we're going to have a pretty hectic day 3 between maybe 2, probably 2. We'll see.
All right. Well, that'll do it for the recruiting for our departing Knights that are now moving on to the NFL. Remember, the Big 12 has its combined Combine or Pro Day in Dallas as well, right? So that's to come as well. So there'll be more conversations around that. But let's talk a little bit about some new Knights that have joined the fold. And Alan, why don't you talk a little bit about Dalton Riggs and Rubio Long, et cetera, and Kymani Morales?
Yeah, sure. So UCF added to its already, really big transfer class. There hadn't been a transfer since late January. And we just got the latest, which was actually one of the bigger positions that we needed to fill, which was long snapper. As you recall, our long snapper from last season did graduate. We actually have really no one at the position right now. So getting a transfer there might sound a little different, something we don't normally have too many long snapper transfers over the years, but it was actually a pretty big position in need for UCF, considering there's really no scholarship long snappers on the roster currently. So UCF did land a long snapper from BYU. His name is Dalton Riggs. Out of high school, he was ranked as a 4-star long snapper. As you know, generally like kickers and punters and long snappers go through a different outlet that ranks them outside of the traditional ones like Rivals and 247. So Rubio long snapping which is I guess the premier long snapping rater or whatever you want to call them, gave him 4 stars, but he's a pretty big boy, 6'3", 230 pounds. He's going to have 2 years of eligibility remaining. And he did actually play against us this past season. And that was one of the weeks where he actually won the long snapper of the week was against UCF. He also had the Pop-Tart crazy play of the week, and he won BYU special teams champion of the week twice last season. He appeared in all 12 games last year, which, as BYU was really good last year, 11-2. That was really his first year of extensive playing. Prior to last season, he really only played on special or just like, tackling and stuff on special teams, wasn't really the starting long snapper, but landed that role this past year. So looks to be a good fit, someone that we could use. It has pretty good experience after playing in the last 12 games and is already in the Big 12. So don't have to worry about any sort of transition there. So that's a pretty big pickup, even though it's just a long snapper. It is a position that we needed.
Hey, Alan, what year is he in college? Because I'm curious why, I'm thinking, BYU had a really good team last year and has had a pretty consistent team. So to get someone like that here, I'm curious.
Yeah, he's a redshirt junior, actually. He was in the class of 2022. So he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. I'm not sure exactly why he left.
We threw a bag at him.
Dude, our bag is not bigger than BYU's bag. I can tell you that. Well, I don't know. I don't know, Ben. We might have overpaid because we didn't have anybody on the roster and no prospect.
That could be it. I mean, I don't know if BYU has an incoming long snapper. I mean, I do know the general rule of thumb, though, with special teams players is that there's only one scholarship for each of those positions. So if there's a backup kicker, they will not get a scholarship until they become the starter, at least prior to NIL and all that. So maybe that doesn't matter, but just they're not going to be on scholarship unless they are the starter at their position.
Yeah, that was a big controversy when Gus had 2 kickers on scholarship. He gave a scholarship to someone. And a lot of times it's roster management where they're having to, all right, we'll bring you in. You won't be on scholarship when you come in, but once the other scholarship falls off after they graduate, we'll give you their scholarship kind of thing in the fall.
Right.
So, Alan, I don't want to put you on the spot, so you can just, if you don't know the answer to this, but what was the crazy play of the week that he was a part of? Do you even remember? Does any of us remember that from the BYU game? I mean, there's a lot of plays that we want to forget, but
if that was during our game, I don't
know if that was during our game. I think he was named here actually.
Well, it said it was during the UCF game. It was the Pop.
I think it was that was player of the week. I don't know if that was the Pop-Tart crazy play.
It was a fake field goal on October 28th.
Okay.
Okay. So
he
put this on his own.
Sort of
Ben,
I got that information from his own Twitter. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say I tried to put that game out of my mind because I was with Rob, our good buddy Rob, who was on here watching that game at his house, and probably about after a quarter and a half of football, we increased our alcohol intake significantly after watching that game because it was not pretty.
That it was during our game, and I will tell you, I remember this stupid play because I was on my way back for my presentation to my seats. So that's one of the first things I saw. They were at the 28-yard line. They lined up for a 46-yard field goal. The deep snapper snapped it to the kicker, who then, instead of placing the ball for the field goal attempt, flipped the ball through his legs as the kicker raced towards the 1st-yard line. I remember that.
So, yeah, the full breakdown, I mean, Josh is right about the Pop-Tart crazy play of the week was against UCF, but then he was also the long snapper player of the week as judged by Rubio against Utah. And then he was part of 2 game-winning field goals against SMU and Utah. And he was a 2-time BYU special teams champion of the week against Baylor and Utah. So seemingly had a pretty good season. So I'm not sure why, he's transferring, but seems like a good get for us though.
I guess he wasn't getting his Pop-Tarts anymore. So, All right, let's talk a little bit about Kymani Morales.
Yeah, so UCF does pick up their second verbal commitment of the 2026 class. Can you believe we're already recruiting to 2026? But this is a guy, 6'1", 196 pounds, plays right in my backyard at American Heritage, which is a pretty good program down here in Fort Lauderdale. He's not currently ranked, but that may just be something that's, a little premature. I'm sure that will change because he does have 11 FBS offers, including offers from several SEC schools like Arkansas, Kentucky, as well as other Power Fours like Minnesota and Purdue. So he's not someone that's, not getting looked at. He does have 11 FBS offers, just doesn't have a official ranking yet, at least by 247 Sports. I'm sure he probably does on Rivals though, because they usually rank this. So I would probably guess he's a 3-star over there. He's like I said, plays at American Heritage, and has had a pretty good career as a starting linebacker at Heritage. Someone's been a playmaker for them and has got a good size here. And, linebacker has obviously been a position of need at UCF for several years now, where we've recruited, and whether it's in the portal or in high school, and either the guys from high school didn't really play much or just the transfers didn't work out too much. But, getting a linebacker, in state, getting him to kind of stay home, a guy that has multiple SEC offers, I think is a big pickup. And someone, as more and more tape comes out over the next year and a half, will probably rack up quite a few offers and start to get some national rankings there. So I think it's a solid pickup for you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So this is a 2026 player. He's listed at 6'1", 196, right? So we've been getting under Gus, he favored more taller linebackers, right? So 6'3", 6'4", 240-pound type linebackers. You guys got to remember, this is a 2026 pickup. He's got a good frame. He's 196 pounds now. He'll pick up probably another 10, 15 pounds before he gets to UCF and a college weight program, right? I will also tell you that one of the things that's going to happen if he's a commit that we believe in, which he is, and his number of tackles was significant last year. He will be the coaches at UCF will be giving him a workout schedule for him to do at high school. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does not pick up at least 15 pounds by the time he hits campus, as this is 2026. That's a long way out when you're talking about a high school recruit.
Yeah. And I will note also it's, out of the, there's only been 2 commits so far, but they've both been linebackers. So the other one was, Michael McClinton, who, committed back in January, was the first Frost High School or new Frost High School commit, I should say, since he came back. So clearly Frosty is in need at linebacker, as the first 2 guys have been both linebackers. And something that can always make us feel good is both are from Florida. So Frost is, staying local, staying in Central Florida, going down in South Florida like he did that first time, at least the early indication is that. So 2 linebackers so far. So the class is just getting started, and I'm sure we'll have some good pickups over the next few months.
Yeah, Tim in Florida says National Signing Day should now be called Future Transfer Portal Entrance. 100%. I mean, that's
good point.
That's one of the things we've talked about quite a bit, right? But I do think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Frost, because Frost says his whole approach is he's going to get guys that want to be here and he can coach up, right? So yes, there's some coach speak there. Yes, there's some naivety involved with that statement because of the fact that he hasn't been in this NIL era. But at the same time, his stated goal is not to build like Gus. So that may change. The other thing that's of note is the coaches actually submitted to the governing body that they want to, this was last week or the week before, that they want to eliminate one of the national signing days. So go back to one from two. So it'll be interesting. The coaches were 100% behind it. The NCAA's governing bodies still have to, are considering it. It was presented. They're considering it now, but there may be a day where we go back to one signing day, not in the too far future, because if you think of it from a coaching's perspective, I mean, Gus talked about it when he was here. As soon as our bowl game was over, like there was no break. They're right into recruiting, and there may be a possibility where this goes from 2 to 1. But at the end of the day, with Coach Frost, it'll be interesting to see because his goal is to get them in and to build them up and to make sure that he's got the right character guys that want to stay here, right? So a little bit about the I don't know if you guys remember from the GOL days, one of the things Coach O'Leary used to say is that I don't want you to commit here unless you're 100% going to come here. With NIL, it'll be interesting to see how that, if we do build these guys up and we do take these 3-star, borderline 4-star guys and really help them mature as athletes, will they become more sticky or not? Or are we going to keep being, as Tim says here, the future transfer portal entrance for National Signing Day? So more to come.
Yeah, I think that's what's fascinating is about the guys that we almost get in recruiting. Like we need to still be somewhat excited about the recruits that we are getting, especially in this new era, as you mentioned with Frost, coming back and seemingly, or at least when he was here and seemingly still as you mentioned, having, more of a concentration on development than potentially the turnkey player that Gus was really looking for. We certainly need to pay attention to recruiting and continue to talk about it and hope that some of these guys contribute either right away or quickly in their career. But it is about the guys we almost get as well, because transfer portal is still going to be a real thing.
Well, the other thing is going to be interesting too is, Frost didn't really have a full recruiting cycle or nowhere near one for this last one, right? A lot of the guys that we would want to get or that we're used to getting would have been gone by the time he joined us as coach because of the timing of everything.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens for the 2026 class to see, hey, we've kind of gotten used to that shot in the arm with the 4 stars and competing for the big guys in the state of Florida. Will Frost continue that, hey, we're looking for the guys that want to be here that we can build up? Is he going to also be able to compete for some of those big anchor players that we're going to be looking for? The Tavion Swints of the world, the John Walkers of the world that we competed with Florida for. Can we get enough of those guys to stay home so we can build classes around them? Because you still want to get the talent that someone like John Walker represents, et cetera, and keep them here. So 2026 to me is more of a litmus test and will be a better evaluation of what our recruiting will be going forward than 2025 was, because we really didn't have the time or the relationships to keep or build relationships with guys to keep them here. All right. With that being said, I want to talk a little bit about something that involves the future of college football and really how it pertains to the Big 12 and UCF football. So one of the things that we've been talking about ad nauseum for the past 2 years is that FSU and Clemson have been stomping their feet over a lawsuit where their stated goal was to get out and position themselves, obviously, for the Big Ten and the SEC. And then you had recently, in the last couple of weeks, North Carolina's super secret plan that everybody knew was happening and we were talking about, which was, hey, we want to get out of the ACC as well, but we're going to let Clemson and FSU take the hits, the PR hits as it as it pertains to suing our own conference, right? So that's happened. UNC still looking. That all was leaked recently, but what those lawsuits have come to a conclusion this past week. And what was decided was that the ACC was going to take 40% of its revenues and divvy those up to the top performing TV draws for the conference. And that equates to about $10 to $15 million difference per school that's in that top tier, and a detraction of about $7 million a piece for the schools that are not. So basically, we talked ad nauseum about the TV contract. We talked about what that does if they do split that revenue. So that TV contract dollar amount, whatever the average was that we were all talking about, is going to be reduced by $7 million for the rest of the schools and increased by 10 to 15 millions for the rest of the for the other schools that are in that top tier. Now, as it pertains to the Big 12, one, I think, and for UCF, I think this is a good thing. One, it locks them into the contract, brings some stability back to the conference. There will be, it gives us a little more runway to get our programs up to snuff to be able to compete at the level. So whenever that next round of consolidation is, we have the ability to elevate ourselves and our brand and show that our programs should be picked up next. And I think for the Big 12, I don't think that works. I mean, the parity in the conference and the ability for multiple teams not really to stand out. You look at what happened with Utah this year coming in the conference, telling everybody, hey, we're going to run this conference. And you look what happened to them in football and basketball. So Mark Harlan's a lot quieter these days than he was in the past, right? I think this bodes well for us. I think this bodes well for the Big 12. I think this bodes well because I don't think they could implement the same thing. There's not a big enough brand that could say, hey, we're drawing in enough figures. And it puts us as a competitive advantage versus some of those other schools in the ACC. Because if we would have joined the ACC, a lot of us wanted to join the ACC, then those schools in that lower tier, we'd be taking a gut punch for $7 million in revenue every year that's sorely needed at UCF. So what do you guys think about that? How does it affect UCF? Do you think it's a good thing for UCF? What are your thoughts on all of that?
So I'll start this. So I think if we can get our stuff together, it is a good thing. And the reason is that the 2030 piece to this, there's something like after 2030, there's a known payout and it's $100 million. So we have until 2030 because I'm guaranteeing you there's a reason that number is there. And I'm guaranteeing you that at some point that's going to be a palatable enough dollar amount that some conference is going to figure out how to pull at least one of the two away to make bigger conferences. So to me, it still gives us runway. It kind of destabilizes the ACC. I mean, it stabilizes and destabilizes, right? The end date's not 2036 or 7 anymore, or at least of this current iteration. That to me, that time to live is within 5 or 7 years now. I feel like at the end of the day, there's the potential for this to be good for us because at some point we either have to get our stuff together and be a valuable ad as the Wake Forests or whatever of a conference, or let's use Vanderbilt as a better example, to get to where the big money is in the Big Ten and the SEC, like Tim was saying. So if we want to either be a very competitive best of the rest, which is weird saying being in the Big 12, or get to where the money is, we need some type of shakeup. We're not going to be able to do it on our own unless we get our own billionaire or 2 or 3 and SMU our way in. I just don't see that happening to those leagues.
We've got 2.
Yeah, I know we need more, sadly. But that's kind of how I feel about it.
Well, to your point, Josh, it's 2035 is the important time because that's when the ACC's grant of rights is up. Now they're going back and litigating the grant of rights as well. That part isn't settled yet. But 2035, 2030, go ahead.
I was going to say, you are right, and I believe that grant of rights for those 5 years and the buyout at some point, if the way the TV money goes, is going to be low enough in an insane way, low enough to leave. That's just, depending on how the grant of rights works with the future revenue from the other conference. But if it's just the money from the ACC that they could have earned, I think they're going to find some private equity 10, 20% buyout of some conference.
I hope not. And here's the reason why.
I agree.
And here's the reason why, right? If the ACC stays together through 2035, right? If it's too painful to do that. For UCF, that's the best thing, because in 2030, there's going to be another expansion conversation, right? College football, the admin and the leadership of college football has said there's about another $1.5 billion left on the table right now for the playoff. So we are in a better position as a conference and as an institution if the FSU, Clemson, and UNC are still in the conference through 2035 through that negotiation, because that will not be an even split. The last split wasn't even, but it would be a more uneven split if they pulled those three brands out of the ACC beforehand. So that's why I think it's important for UCF in the short, quote unquote, short term, because we're at 2025 right now, for us to maximize that money until whatever the next relegation or consolidation is for college football. Because unfortunately, I do believe that we're headed towards, that quote unquote super league that we were talking about before, which is crazy to think about. But I think for UCF, I think this is good news, especially if it stays through 2035. We'll see what the terms of the grant of rights are after 2030. And that's a good point. Ben, it looked like you had something to say about this.
No, I mean, you guys made most of the points. I agree with you that I think it is a good thing for UCF because it stabilizes things a bit for the next 5 years at least. And because it just feels like even over the last 2 years, and you look a few years prior to that, where you kind of thought that conference realignment wasn't going to be a huge thing. And then all of a sudden the last 2 years, with the shakeups in the SEC, the Big Ten, and then of course the Pac-12 kind of disbanding and moving their conference kind of being split amongst a number of different conferences, where it feels like this move at least gives us a kind of 5-year, deep breath to take, where we're not going to have conference realignment for the next at least 5 years. And that, I think that's helpful because in today's college athletics, conference realignment seems to be a topic almost every season. And to think that we're actually going to get a 3-year break from that, let alone a 5-year break, potentially more, is actually a good thing. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air. So I think that part of it makes it a little interesting for me.
All right. With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the next topic. I just want to touch on this briefly. Is UCF's football stadium, unlike the Cows, who have again moved their date of where they're talking about the start and all of that. Yeah, move. Good one, Josh. Have moved those dates and moved their times and moved the final iteration of what their stadium is going to look like based on their GP. UCF has actually broken ground. And we've seen a lot of fences going up. We've seen a lot of heavy equipment and logistics stuff kind of happening up until this point, but they're actually have torn up this past week. They've torn up that practice field, graded it, and they're starting to dig holes, which we don't know yet if that's going to be for the parking garage or if it's going to be for additional support for the new tower renovation. But things are moving, and I expect them to move quickly until the season starts. So if you are local, you can stop by, take a look, check it out, take pictures if you want. There's different places where they are kind of like following the progress, but love to see it on Twitter, and make sure you hit us up there as well. All right. So next on the list, let's go ahead and until we get to the pivot poll, I'm gonna keep this going. Let's go ahead and pivot.
Pivot.
All right, there it is. And talk a little bit of UCF hoops. So the best of times and the worst of times when it comes to UCF hoops, right? So had a big win versus Utah, right? And then we played K-State and got our first win ever, as we learned last week.
Yeah.
We had never beaten K-State in anything. We beat K-State, and then we turned around, and played TCU, which I called TC Poo because that was that game. So let's start with the good, and we'll move on to the not so good, and talk a little bit about that K-State game. Ben, what were your takeaways from K-State?
Yeah, I think it was overall a good effort. It was another a back-to-back win there. It was just another, it was kind of like some fire had been lit underneath the team, as far as I saw a lot more defensive effort than I had seen in previous games prior to Kansas State. It was, like you said, it was good to beat them finally. And one of the things that I was just super impressed with in that game is, and the guy that I've been talking about all season, is Mustafa Chiam. I mean, he's just a difference maker. He almost had, and quite frankly, he kind of should have had it, because there was a couple that were taken away from him. He should have absolutely had a triple-double with blocks, which would have been a very rare thing to happen in any level of basketball, let alone college basketball at the Big 12 level. And so Mustafa Chiam was just a difference maker, and he was just the anchor in the middle that we need. And he was, extremely efficient from the floor as well. Made some big buckets, like some timely buckets, but overall, just his presence in the paint, his defensive presence, it just reminded me. It reminded me a lot of when Taco Fall was here, and what you had in the paint in Taco Fall. It just allowed, and it was just interesting because BJ Taylor was on the broadcast, and he even mentioned or at least alluded to this, because I was watching the game and I was just thinking it reminded me of the time when Taco was here, where our guards could just play so aggressive on the ball defense. They could get into passing lanes and they can kind of take chances, because they really had this confidence that they had such a strong rim protector behind them. And this being the case with Chiam in that game, I think it was just on full display. I think what impresses me, and I've said this before, but what impresses me the most about Mustafa is just how he's progressed throughout this season, how he's handled the importance that he has on this team, and he has stayed out of foul trouble a lot. Like, he was getting into foul trouble a lot in the beginning of the season, and now he has just figured out a way to kind of be available in the games. Playing 31 minutes.
Stay on the court.
Yeah, I mean, 31 minutes in this game, so certainly was available to his team, because we know that there's just nothing behind him. I mean, there's no size behind him. There's no consistency from the forward or center position behind him. And so at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to see much more of Rokas Yasus.
Well, he's still in a boot too.
Yeah.
that doesn't
yeah.
help
So yeah,
matters
you're
either.
right. He's dealing with some things as well, and then Benny Williams is trying to contribute a little bit. He does so in spurts, but
Yeah.
when he's out of the game, there's a big difference here. And him being available and just having the conditioning, having the understanding how he settled into this level of basketball, I just think is really impressive and shouldn't be. And in my opinion, it can't be overstated, just his importance to this team. And then you obviously have a guy like Keyshawn Hall that just went off. He did his usual thing. And went off on the offensive end. But I thought he did actually have some pretty good moments on defense as well. And then Darius Johnson just kind of putting it away at the end with that spectacular play and just kind of leading us down the stretch. It was overall a good game with an excellent finish there with that play call that was done, and then all of a sudden we get the steal and everything. It was just a good game, good finish.
Yeah, I think the big thing, just to kind of touch on a couple of things for you, you mentioned progress with Chim, right? So a few things that I've noticed, it's not just his defensive game, because he was out of position a lot, especially earlier in the season on help defense, right? He'd be so out of position he couldn't get back to the basket to help rim protect. And so I think he's definitely getting better there, definitely with the fouls. But offensively, he showed flashes, right? But what I like that I'm seeing from him now more than I did before was putbacks. He's fighting for those possessions and then getting those rebounds and getting the putbacks. All season long, we have had more attempts than the other team pretty much, except for this game. This game, K-State actually had 65 and we had 60, right? But by and large, we've had 5 to 6 more attempts than what opposing teams have had. And, one of the things that's been frustrating is whether it be fast breaks or whether it be, normal possessions, we have not gotten the ball back for offensive rebounds, let alone get that extra offensive rebound back up to score points. And other teams have taken advantage of that on their end. So I think that's a huge thing there. The thing about Keyshawn Hall and this really goes into the next game, but something I called out there in the KSU game and the Utah game is there are times where he'll get himself, he's so used to playing one-on-one ball that when he's double teamed, he'll get himself in situations where he forces shots instead of making an extra pass, or he'll get himself in the middle, within 7-8 feet of the basket, but against the baseline. And that's where he makes mistakes. And so, I'd like to see Keyshawn Hall, and the biggest knock, he's our best scorer on the team. Obviously would be happy if it would be better if we had some other options, but we don't because of injuries, right? But he's feeling himself sometimes a little bit too much. And we saw he had a great game in K-State, but then he would turn around and he had a terrible game, at least to start with, at TCU. And the last part I'll say is, again, our shooting woes from behind the arc are continuing. I mean, in this game, it was 24.1%. Again, we were hovering around 34% as a team, from three. And then we turn around and we play for example, the early TCU game that we played the first go around, which we won 85-58. Earlier in the season, we shot 45%, and now we're averaging in the 20s. So I think you're right, Ben. Defensively, we played a lot better, although we let up in the second half, especially late. K-State definitely narrowed the gap. We outscored them 41-34 in the first half, which was great. We got out to a fast start, which is something we've been missing. And then they actually outscored us 42-39, but we did enough because we got frustrated on a lot of possessions there late with K-State in the last 6 to 8 minutes. There was a lot of empty possessions there. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, where just on that point, I think where this game was won was that last 3 minutes before the half, and then the first 4 or 5 minutes going into the second half. I mean, that's where the game was just, we were able to kind of go on a run there and have some consistency. And you're right, they made it close at the end because we had some defensive lapses and a couple of their guys made some big shots, especially some threes. But yeah, so they definitely made it close. In my opinion, that KSU coach, whose name escapes me right now, I'm about to pay him a compliment, but I can't think of his name. Like he's a very, I mean, that's a very well coached team year in and year out. So being able to get a win against them when we quite frankly really needed it, regardless of their record, I think is a good sign. It's just at this point in the season, we had too much of a lull there in the middle of the season. So I'm not really talking about a good sign as far as moving forward. It's just it was certainly a bright spot there when we needed to see a little bit of fight in this team. I think also, like you mentioned, the rebounding, we were able to out rebound them. They did get some offensive rebounds. We had the same amount as they did, but we were able to kind of get key rebounds when we needed to. And yeah, like if you're a Magic fan like I am, when Hito Turkoglu was with the Magic, he was always a type of guy that, like, when he made his first like 3-pointer of the game, especially if it was like a tough shot, you were just like cringing a little bit because you were like, oh man, this guy's gonna shoot the crazy shots the rest of the night. And that's a little bit of Keyshawn Hall has a little bit of that in him. Like, you're just like, oh, I don't want him to heat check too much. I don't want him to be too confident, because he definitely it's kind of both sides of the coin. He's a bucket getter, and we haven't had a bucket getter like him at UCF in a while, with that kind of size that he has and that quickness and athleticism. And he's the type of guy that if you need to spread it out and have somebody take it one-on-one, I want Keyshawn with the ball in his hands. But also he does get a little lost in that one-on-one game, and we don't make the extra pass on offense, and it winds up at times, especially when we're going through a little bit of a slump, that kind of ball movement that you really need out of good teams offensively, we kind of regress back into that one-on-one, which will only work if somebody is spectacular. And luckily for us, at some cases, like Keyshawn has been spectacular, but when you mix in some injuries and lack of ball movement in those situations, you kind of it doesn't turn out as well for you as it will. You'll have some success, and that's what we've seen this season.
Yeah, and the Big 12 is it's a conference that you need more than one Keyshawn Hall.
Oh, for sure.
So,
for sure.
If you're going to rely on him, he's got to understand he's going to get doubled. He was the Big 12's leading scorer. I think he still is, or if not, he's close, right?
Yeah, no, he's still leading the conference in points per game, yeah.
Which means the defense is going to collapse on you. And what's happening is the defenses are collapsing on him when he has big games. And that's what we saw the next game, right? And he just doesn't know how to deal with that. And that's the biggest knock for me on Keyshawn Hall is he is your one-on-one guy, but you've got to also be able to threaten with your other pieces. Otherwise, all the defense has to do is collapse on Keyshawn and then disrupt the entire offense. And what I liked that I saw out of DJ at the K-State game, to your point, was he was still that cool, calm, collected person, but he started taking over the game like he did last year and the year before when we needed him to, right? That he was the Keyshawn Hall, right? Both of them can draw fouls. Both of them are good free throw shooters. So you need more. If you're going to play ISO ball, you're going to need more than one person that can score that way. Mm-hmm. And you're going to need hopefully a 3-point shooter to push defenses out to the perimeter so it doesn't clog up the lane. And that free throw shooting has been the biggest difference in the latter half of this season, I think, for us, and makes a big difference as to why we are where we are versus where we want to be.
Sure.
So
yeah, it's crazy to see the stats though. Like Keyshawn Hall had he was 10 for 12 from the line. Yeah,
I know.
At the line, like that's getting in the paint. That's getting downhill. That's causing havoc. But you're right. I mean, some of the. I mean, you look at now.
He's the guy you want when you want to get a player out of the game, right? It's because you have him attack that guy on defense and get fouled as he's going up because he's so tall and lanky. Like BJ, he's more a pit bull, and he knows how to use his shoulder and his body to shield, which is why he scores so effectively in the paint. Whereas Keyshawn Hall is so long and lanky, and he's got ups that he's drawing the foul from people because he's getting above the defense when he's going to the hoop. And when he's doing that, you have him and iso ball attack that guy and have him foul so you can get them into foul trouble in the double bonus and back them off of their defense if you want, or, get them to get that guy out of the game, right? If you get 2 quick fouls early or, before the half, they've got 3 fouls, you limit a lot of what their star players can do to you. And that's what Keyshawn Hall is used for, especially late in games. So, but he's got to be smart with the ball and understand when he's being double teamed or passing out of it. And you can't always play ISO ball, and you've got to have those other players step up so he can show out.
Right.
All right. Do we want to talk a little bit about TCU and the difference in this game versus last? UCF sits now 15-14, so still above 500, 6-12 in conference. So remember last year when we started conference season, we were talking about maybe they win 3 or 4 games, right? We're at 6 games now. I'm not saying that that's what the expectation was for this year, especially because of how they started.
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge there. But does this, Ben, I'm going to ask you this question. Does this knock us out of an at-large bid? The only way that we can really make it to the tournament now is if we win the tournament. We all know what the conference tournament, we all know what the chances are.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it necessarily this loss on the road necessarily knocks us out now. You don't want to be out of the game from start to finish, because losing by 11 on the road, it does hurt you a little bit. Now, I only say that to say that if we, I think we'd have to make the conference tournament final to get back into that conversation. So maybe we don't have to win it, but in order at this point, the seeding that we're going to have, and I'd have to look to see where we're at, but obviously we're one of the bottom teams in the conference. We're currently ranked, I think 11th in the conference or something like that. But in order to make the conference tournament final, that would mean that we would have to essentially have a top 10 victory. We'd have to beat a team like Iowa State or a team like Houston. We'd have to and even prior to that, potentially have to face a team like BYU, who has been on fire lately. And it's actually weird to look at now every game, every night's a big game in the Big 12, but it's just interesting to look at where both of those teams were on that Saturday night game that we had at home where BYU came into town. Both of those teams were kind of even in the conference record wise, both on the cusp of, they could take off, they could kind of stay about, and who knows what's going to happen with those two teams. And at that point at UCF season, it was we had some head scratching losses, but we were just coming off a close loss at Kansas. And it was maybe we can still finish the season strong. And it's just wild to see how where UCF has gone and where BYU has gone since then. But anyways, what I'm saying, it just popped into my head because BYU has had some great wins lately and they've gotten themselves ranked. And then I think they just had a loss recently, but we would have to go through a team like that in the probably second round of the conference tournament before we even got to the semis. And so you have a chance if you can make it to the conference final in order to do it. But obviously that's a far-fetched thing to think that we could get to that point based on what we have seen out of this group the last month and a half. It's and even that I would caveat with, we got to win the next 2 games. Winning the next 2 games is important only because it would guarantee us a winning record. And, it would be something to, or at least it would guarantee us the 500, record. And so that kind of sounds a little like coy to kind of hope for that. But I mean, at least we could kind of say that, if we could win the next 2 games, we would get a quad 2 win, I think, if we beat West Virginia to finish out the season. But regardless, it would guarantee a winning record if we could win the next 2 games. So at least we'd have that going for us. So,
well, I think for Knight Nation, we made the joke last week, and shout out to Trey Neal who joined us, who's still saying Elite or 8 or bust. I think, buddy, at this point it's bust. So I will say this. I think we go back to the best we can hope for right now, unfortunately, is, just basically making the NIT, which sucks.
Yeah.
Especially after this past season, the expectations for the squad. And I think also the body language that I saw out of Johnny Dawkins after this past game versus TCU was not somebody who was coming back, I think. And he was what's interesting is he's got pretty demure press conferences, right? But the last few, you can see it a little bit. It was wearing on him, and you could see it on his face, which I hate it for the guy. But at the same time, I think reality may be setting in.
Yeah, and I actually, it's like one of those things that makes you wonder, because I didn't get a chance to watch the TCU game. I saw a little bit of it. I had a lot going on with kids this weekend as far as sporting events go, but I didn't get a chance to really watch it. But I had heard what you just described, just looking dejected, and I've seen some of the press conferences as well to match up with what you're talking about with Johnny's demeanor. And it almost makes me wonder a little bit, he's not a young guy by any means either. So like it almost makes me wonder.
He's only in his 60s. I think he's 67 if I'm not
I understand that. I'm not talking about, he's not like a, super old guy either, but I'm saying he's not in his 40s. Let's put it that way. And so I actually am starting to wonder if what's happened this season and kind of the reasons behind it, in the sense that, like, the type of team that he has to kind of build year in and year out, try to rebuild every year. And we've seen it so much throughout college basketball in general, but like, you just wonder if it won't necessarily be a forcing of the hand. It'll actually be Johnny bringing up the conversation of like, hey, I think it's time for me to take a step back, take a step away. And this might be his last season, kind of, because ultimately it's kind of Johnny's decision, as opposed to, him being just flat out let go or fired.
We talked about it last week that, my bet is he, no matter what happens, if he steps away, it'll be either a retirement or I'm stepping away because I'm not getting it done. I love Orlando.
Yeah, like he won't be. Kind of thing. He's not going to allow himself to be necessarily fired. Like unceremoniously fired.
I don't think Terry would do that either.
He wouldn't do it.
And he doesn't deserve it, to be frank.
No,
right?
I agree.
I mean, he's a good dude. He's wore Orlando on his sleeve. He's been a good advocate for us, and I don't think he deserves that. And I think he would step aside. I don't think that's going to be going down as a firing. I mean, the contract's set up that way, et cetera. Like for his buyout is set up favorably for him, considering the contract. And we talked about that when they were doing those negotiations in the offseason last year, right? So everything is set up for him to leave gracefully. I think Johnny had a one more ride to prove it kind of situation. And now that the season's winding down and we're kind of falling off a cliff, I think reality's setting in. I don't think he's happy about it. Obviously, he wants to win for Orlando. And he's always said for the community and for, UCF, he's been really big about talking about UCF. And he felt the same way about Duke. And I think he kind of transferred that to UCF for the time that he's been here. But I really do think it's over. And I do want to make one more quick point. Tim jogged my memory here. He said Elite 8 of the NIT. Are we even Elite 8 in Florida? Trey comes back, UCF or Columbus High School, Miami. Trey, and then Tim says, Trey, I was thinking mainly Orange County. So I guys, this team is not that bad. Right. I know it's fun and funny to talk about, but I will say this year, the Big 12 and I think the ACC, there is a new tournament that is being elevated above the NIT. So UCF will have the opportunity to be in that inaugural tournament, I think. So I think there will be something there. UCF or Evans High School, Tim. Josh says, ha, ha, ha. And Trey Neal says, allegedly, Roger.
Look,
allegedly.
All I'll say is this. There's a couple things in my head when it comes to this season. Part of me is like, if Jalen Sellers' back doesn't go out, like what changes?
There's a lot of ifs. I think Sellers is a big component of that, especially from a scoring perspective and 3-pointers.
I think at this point, that stretch where we just couldn't get the defense where it needed to be, like if we get one or two of those, we have a different conversation. But I think unfortunately this is another if type of scenario, unless we somehow miraculously, I agree with Ben. If we get to the finals of the Big 12 and we beat someone in the top 15, I think that might give us enough season-ending juice to win. I don't even think we're going to win at West Virginia, to be frank. So
I mean, that's the thing. It's like we can talk about that what if as well, but I mean, I don't think even in our black and gold hearts, we really believe that they're going to be able to make the final of this conference tournament. It's highly unlikely at best. I mean, to say it's highly unlikely is kind of an understatement. It's just these teams don't go this isn't college football. Like this isn't, in the sense that this isn't a bowl game after the season's over. Like these teams go into this conference tournament and they're not just looking for, it's March now, guys. I mean, it's just these teams like Iowa State, they're not going to be satisfied with this regular season that they've had, and they're not going to be looking ahead to the NCAA tournament. They're going to go into that tournament and they're looking to take down the Big 12 crown.
They're looking for seeding.
What's that?
If anything else, they're looking to improve their seeding because they had a couple of late losses there.
100%. Yeah. I mean, nobody is taking that tournament off and taking it less seriously. And to say that they could go through that gauntlet in a 5-day stretch is just highly unlikely. And I mean, obviously, it would be like one of the greatest comebacks and the greatest runs, and I'd be so excited. But I mean, I'm happy that over the last few weeks we finally got a couple quad 2 wins. We hadn't had that all year, but at one point we were 3-3 in quad 1 games, and now we're 3-10. It's just. We were right there. It's just, it is going to be a little bit of that what if season. And I think it's going to center around 2 things for me. And you've already said it, Josh, but it's going to center around the 2 things for me. It's going to be, what could have this team looked like with a healthy Jalen Sellers? What would the makeup of this team be if that was the case? And then what if we pulled it off, Houston at home and Kansas on the road? Those are the 2 games that Houston at home and Kansas on the road. We win that game in January with Houston at home, who knows what could have happened after that point, because that could have been a real springboard for us.
Yeah, and I will say this, that over time, I'm still excited that we can have this conversation, be like, in January we had this game where we could have won, and we have the record we have, and we have a shot at being in the tournament. It's not going to take that much of a step up from where we are right now to get over the hump.
Let me circle back to something that Tim said. He said, okay, will Dawkins be coaching in the postseason? And it ties into what you just said. I think that the what ifs, there's been too many years of it.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with you.
So to answer Tim's question from my seat, I think he absolutely will. I mean, no matter what, he goes out on his own terms, which includes whatever postseason that means, whether it be NIT, whether it be this other tournament, this new tournament that they've created, whatever that is. Johnny Dawkins is going to be coaching whatever postseason we have the opportunity to play in.
For sure.
I 100% believe in that. And I think Ben does too. And Josh. Yeah. And
I mean, I just think there's no way that we're going to accept any postseason bid and have an interim head coach. Like, it's just like, honestly, at the end of the day, these other tournaments, they last a couple weeks. Like, they're they're not 4 weeks like the NCAA tournament. Like, it's not going to be, it's not going to hurt us in our new coach search, if we embark on that, which we all agree is highly likely. As we embark on that, it's not going to hurt us those couple of weeks. I mean, because quite frankly, some of the coaches that we're going to be going after are going to be playing, hopefully for them, well into March, at the end of March. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly, there's no doubt in my mind that he would coach a UCF's last basketball game this season, regardless of where that is. And who knows, it'd be great if regardless of the tournament and the postseason tournament, it'd be great to have one last kind of ride like that. I don't think anything's going to be enough. I think that this will be his last season as our head basketball coach. For all the factors that we've mentioned, but it would be kind of cool if we get into one of those tournaments and get some wins and get some momentum. It would be kind of cool to have one last ride like that.
It will be one of the tournaments, not the tournament, and I'll tell you why. On the conference tournament, I don't think we have a shot at winning. As to your point, it's 5 days, and Mustafa Chiem has no backup, and he is a huge part of us staying competitive.
Yeah.
If he's playing as a freshman 31 minutes a game for that conference championship, I don't see it happening.
It'd take like a Herculean effort if that's the case, because you're right, because we don't have the depth that we thought we did in the non-conference and kind of going through the beginning of the season. We talked a lot about quality depth on this show because we saw flashes of it. But at the end of the day, once you get towards conference play, you always cut down your lineup to about a 7-man, 8-man rotation at the most. I mean, what we're really seeing right now is about a 7-man rotation out of necessity because of injuries. But certainly at the front court positions, at the center position, we've got one guy really, and we got a guy that can spell him for a little bit, but it's Mustafa Chiem, and that's it. And I agree with you. We can't get through a tournament of that importance and the amount of back-to-back games that you have, thinking that someone like him.
You've played in them, so you know what they're like. I mean,
it's just it's too much. So. But right. We'll see what happens the rest of the year.
Uplifting note.
Tim, I agree. He says hopefully he will pull off a Steve Fisher of Michigan and win some tourney, go out with something good. I agree. Nice. And, we hope, as much as we love Johnny as a person, that he gets to ride out on a positive note professionally for everybody involved. So, all right. let's go ahead and pivot again. And normally we would get into UCF baseball, but I want to talk about something extremely important for UCF, and that is our pivot poll for this week. So, we heard we got a comment that we talked about last week. We put out a poll. It's going to be part of a new thing, a segment that we're going to be doing. We're going to put out a poll again every week. This week's poll, we talked a lot about our Terry Mahajer and UCF admin and whether they are in touch with UCF in general. And that'll be this week's poll. We want to see what you guys will say, Night Nation. We do have results from the pivot poll. Remember, last week's poll was about whether we should use the word pivot, because we got some feedback from one of our listeners who said that they don't necessarily like the pivot, and the reasoning being that not everybody says it all at the same time. So the pivot poll, the results are in. We did have 9 folks who participated in that. That's kind of a low number. We want some more. So the only reason I'm mentioning that is because we hope that you participate in some more. And the anti-pivot folks did win the poll. So we're going to we talked about it with our good we talked about it with our good friend Andrew Fagley, who Ben and I were on with Nightline and Trey, and so he had some suggestions on what we can do. So be on the lookout whether we do a variation of the pivot that might be a little bit different, or if we just eliminate it all together, but we'll have something for you next week. In the meantime, make sure, I'll be posting the poll tomorrow, that you vote and tell us your opinion on whether you agree with us that the UCF admin today is out of touch with the fan base. And make sure to share it, like it, comment on it as well. So the anti-pivots win it for the week.
Are we going to allow 9 people to change our swag? Is that really what we're doing here?
Yeah. I mean,
that's fine. That's fine.
It's a listener interactive show. Now that's not the only comments we got this week. And actually, for a little bit of listener love, I do want to give a shout out to Ryan Roy 8409, who said, "Great combo and info." Thank you, Ryan. You are the reason, as well as everybody else, that we do this, and we love, like Tim, who again, you guys can pivot the show for us as well in your comments. So, but for now, shout out to Ryan. We actually had a few more followers follow this past week as well. We appreciate you. Unfortunately, not everybody shows or chooses to show who they follow, so it doesn't come through on the dashboard for us to shout you out all the time. But we do appreciate Alexander, who did subscribe and shows on here as well. So shout out to Alexander. Those of you that did subscribe, thank you. Shout out to you as well. I just can't see your names to shout you out on the show. Please make sure you're liking, sharing, and participating in everything that we do and the pivot poll. All right, let's move on to some baseball news and talk about a little bit. We talked about basketball woes. Let's talk about some positivity as it pertains to baseball. I'm sorry, Ben. You wanted to mention something about that.
I'm sorry. I'm going to pull my one more thing here because
one more thing with
it's an important one. Listen, and so we just talked about the basketball woes, and I get it. I'm with you guys as being a huge UCF basketball fan. But this week is our last home game against Oklahoma State, and that means it's senior night, which we have a decent amount of seniors on this team, or at least, fifth-year guys or guys that are seniors in college. So those Jordan Ivy Curry, Dalen Coleman, Benny Williams, and Jalen Sellers. It may not be his last year playing in college if he goes for a medical red shirt. But Jalen Sellers is also technically a senior. But of course, the most important featured player of this senior night coming up on Wednesday night is Darius Johnson. And he's a player that we need to take a second and appreciate as UCF basketball fans and as UCF fans in general, because we may not see a guy like this at any college program, let alone our beloved UCF program. So obviously he's a guy that's been here for 4 years now. He's been a 4-year contributor to this team. Pretty much a starter in most of the time that he has been here, and certainly a leader on this team. Someone who has had an up and down career. I think if we're being fair, he's had some injuries as well. Which
I think he can apply for a medical red shirt if he wants to. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually walks.
It would be, but I don't really care that his father has been a part of this staff for his career, and that he had a connection to Johnny Dawkins, being from the area of the country that he is from.
And a familial connection.
Area. Yeah, of course. That's absolutely. And so that being said, it's just I don't really care about all that, because someone staying at our school for 4 years and really being an advocate and all that for UCF, it deserves the love that he's going to get this Wednesday night. I hope that he gets a huge reception and a lot of love from the fans, because he deserves it. And just to run down some things that I jotted down here as where he stands in UCF as far as career stats go. So he's 7th in total points for UCF basketball. I believe all these stats are rankings in the Division I era. So I'm not talking about, Bo Clark or any of those guys, but he's 4th in total assists. He's 4th in assist percentage. He's 7th in assists per game. He's 1st, this is what he's known for the most. He's 1st in career steals and steal percentage. He's 3rd in steals per game. So that's something that he's been definitely known for. 6th overall in 3-pointers made, 3rd overall in 3-point attempts, 8th overall at UCF in free throws made. He's somebody who definitely gets to the line from his position. And then as far as a little bit of more of a this isn't really necessarily an advanced stat, but it's, the plus minus, box plus minus. He is 4th in his career at UCF in box plus minus, as well as defensive plus minus. And then he's 4th overall in minutes played. So he's a guy that has put in a lot of time in a UCF uniform, and something that in this era of college basketball moving forward, I don't know if we're going to see another one, unless in the next 5 years there's another drastic kind of rule change to stabilize these kind of things. But to see a guy, he's 4th in minutes played. I don't know exactly where he ranked, how many more minutes he has to put in, if he's close enough to that. I'll have to look at that and see, but certainly, he might be able to climb up that in the coming games and even get in the top 3 or potentially even further up than that. But regardless, I think the guys at the top of that list, minutes played in a UCF uniform, those records might be safe. And so Darius Johnson, senior night coming up on a Wednesday this week. I'm proud that he's a Knight. Let's put it that way.
All right, Mike chimed in. I know we're going to transition to baseball here shortly, but Mike chimed in here just a second ago. Says, does UCF promote Adam Hood or Nadia to head coach and keep the others on staff to try and keep the team together for next season, or do they go outside of the program? Obviously, they'd have to hire a pure defensive-minded AC to come on the staff if they promoted. So Mike, I'm going to give you my opinion first. I don't think so. I think they pivot completely away. In my personal opinion, it's interesting. I think that, from a budget-minded standpoint, if we weren't getting ready to get a huge raise from being full share members of the Big 12 finally, after this season is over, or after this academic year is over, I would agree. But I don't think Terry's thinking that way. I think Terry's knows that there's a lot of pressure of not more of the same. And I think from an optics perspective, I think that they just blow it all up, and with the extra cash he has, sees what he can get. I agree that we would also lose Chim. And he's been Nadai has been really good for us and UCF big men. And he's a valuable asset. So I think wanting to keep him, if we could keep him, and Hood, if we could keep them, because remember, Hood came to us from another program. I think
he brought Keyshawn Hall.
Exactly.
Keyshawn Hall. Yeah.
So and our offense obviously is a lot better this year than it has been in previous years. So I think if we could keep those two members of the staff, it would be great. I think that would be everybody's choice, but I think a lot of it depends on who they get as head coach and what their system looks like. And I think that Terry knows there's been a lot of noise around Johnny Dawkins lately, and he needs a fresh start. So that's just my thought on it.
Yeah, I agree with most of that, Roger. I would be absolutely shocked if Mamadou Njai was promoted to head coach at UCF. I'd be still surprised, greatly surprised, but I'd be less surprised if Adam Hood was. But I don't think either of them would be promoted to head coach at this time. I do think Adam Hood is going to be a head coach in college basketball. I don't necessarily think that his head coaching job is going to be a head coach at a Big 12 program.
No, I think it's G5 mid-major type of program.
Right. It would be a huge get, though, if we can bring in a new head coach and keep both of those guys on staff, because Adam Hood is a great recruiter, but I've been pretty impressed with his ability to step into this staff and show how well he can install an offensive system. I don't necessarily think our players followed it the way that it needs to, but we have played more up tempo this year, and so I've been impressed with Adam Hood. And then Njai, you're absolutely right. I mean, from Taco Fall to even some of the guys like Michael Durr and these kind of turnstile big men that we've had since Taco Fall have all, in my opinion, outperformed what they were prior to coming to UCF. And
he's got a connection to that pipeline out of Africa too.
Yeah, I've been extremely impressed with Njai, with Chiam, as everybody knows. And so I think the number one priority player-wise in a coaching transition, if that were to happen after this season, is how the heck do we keep Mustafa Chiam at UCF? And if that means that we keep Njai on staff, then yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So Mike and Tim, I know Mike says, I know people that have floated Bob Ritchie from Furman, or the guy at Stanford or Sanford too. And Tim says, isn't that Utah head coach available? So the Utah head coach, let me say this about that. Very successful at Utah State, flamed out at Utah. If he had the money that he has there, one point is, that Kansas State team that always does well, they're, I think, number 6 in NIL payroll for basketball. I don't think the Utah head coach would be a good fit here, because our NIL program isn't nearly as competitive as what Utah's is right now. So if he couldn't do it at Utah, I don't see him doing it here. We don't know. And those hot boards, we will get to the hot boards. I think we need to get through the season before we go through realistic hot boards, because there's a lot of names being floated out there right now. And there's a lot of want tos, and I know Terry has got to be in a position now where he's looking out there for folks, but I kind of want to wait on the hot board conversation till we get closer to the end of the season.
Yeah, and I don't even pretend to know what coaches are available. I mentioned to you guys over the text talk that I have called a couple of Utah games in the past, so I have interviewed Craig Smith a few times, and just the
Ben, you're available. Tim says you're available.
No, maybe it'd be a good assistant coach, but I certainly would not be a good head coach. But I could coach up the big man a little bit, maybe. I don't want the job. Let's put it that way. I'd rather be more of a fan.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on to baseball. I know we've talked about this a few times.
Yeah,
I see where
actually move on to baseball now.
The key word was there. I saw it in your eyes.
Yeah, it sadly was
despite our instincts.
Did not come from my mouth. But let's go ahead and talk about baseball a little bit. And the weekend did not start off very well for UCF baseball. And I want to say this. You guys know we had Rich Wallace on. You know that Ben has a relationship with Rich. Rich has been as a UCF alum. He played on championship teams, etc. And he coached at FSU. He coached at Notre Dame as an assistant, and has been a really successful baseball coach. What I was a little appalled at, and I know we were all upset after that first game against the Cows, was all of the questions with regard to Rich's coaching hire. And I know that's knee-jerk reactions, but guys, come on. It's Rich Wallace, and he's doing a great job, right? And like, it was funny because I saw some questions out there. Do you think that Rich was tearing into the team after that first loss? I can tell you this right now. He hates the Cows, and I've talked to him outside of this podcast. Obviously, we can't talk about all the things that we talk about with folks like Rich, because then we wouldn't be able to talk to folks like Rich, right? And we have other kinds of relationships with them. But he hates the Cows as much as any of us do that's on the podcast or that's listening right now. So please, I know that was disappointing to say the least. I think we were all pretty furious at the showing that the baseball team had that first game. But let's not jump on is Rich Wallace the right coach train. The man took us to an NCAA tournament last year, played well. In year one, with a pitching staff, but wasn't as good as this year's pitching staff. Our hitting needs to catch up, and he's been talking all about hitting. And, there's some inside baseball, to use that term, that we won't talk about on here, but I can guarantee you this right now. Rich challenged the team. Rich gave them confidence with some of the statements that he made, because he was confident in their ability to do this. And we ruled them twice after that showing. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But let's talk. Ben, what were your thoughts on the Cows series this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Friday night was disappointing. It kind of just got away from us pretty quick, and that's what happens at baseball games. It just kind of spirals out of control, and you're just kind of like, well, we got another game tomorrow, so let's focus on that. And it's Friday was disappointing, but you kind of saw it over the last couple of games where the intensity of Rich Wallace, some questionable calls happened from the umpires, how he was not afraid to talk about that. Even the game that I went to, which was so we lost 3 in a row. I went to the Sunday night game against Bryant, or the Sunday afternoon game against Bryant. And, definitely he let the home plate umpire know plenty of times if he was not happy with some of the calls that he was making at the plate. And so you see that fire in it. And you're right, Roger. I mean, that's one of the things I appreciate about Coach is him being one of us is he really does seem to understand the war on I-4 rivalry is a thing. And I don't care if we're not in the same conference anymore. If we put those guys on the schedule, if that directionally challenged school to the west is on our schedule, then you're going to get your players to care about it. You're going to get them to understand what this means. And if they didn't understand it going into the series, I can guarantee you they understood it after Friday night. And I think that kind of pivotal moment for me of the whole weekend was when Ross got hit in game one. And obviously game one didn't really work out for us, but you saw a little bit of fire out of Diamez Ross when he didn't appreciate getting hit at the plate. And then you saw a lot of fire out of Rich Wallace with the umpires. And so I like how the team responded on Saturday and Sunday. And we showed the Cows what it's like to be run ruled by a team. We did it twice.
I don't think that's ever happened in UCF baseball history, by the way.
Have 2 run rules in a series.
Yeah.
Probably
let alone
not.
back to back.
Yeah, doing that. Yeah, that's a statement. And the bats needed to wake up. Guys like Lex Bodeker, needed to show their power. We needed to find gaps. So we needed to make crucial hits in big moments. And we did that time and time again on Saturday and Sunday. I mean, guys like Espinal, our second baseman, who got a little bit more playing time because of some injuries and got into some pitch hit situation. He's at a point right now, the games that he's been in that like he's going to be in our lineup now. Like he's hitting the ball too well.
He's earned his way into
he's earned his way into our lineup. So, overall, Braden Calise moving over to third base and when Maduro goes down, and that's the reason why Espinal has gotten in the lineup. Maduro, our third baseman to start the season, has been injured. And so, guys like Calise, who is just this utility player, he started out at second base. He can play, any position in the infield, maybe besides first, but he's just a great player. He's making some great plays.
That's something Rich had brought up in the interview that we had with him, was that he felt the difference between this year's team and he learned his lesson the previous year was we had the team that we needed and the players that we needed, whether it be pitching staff or in the defense, that we could move around. Because remember, we had injuries last year that messed up our lineup and messed up our defense. And he said, he's going to be trying different guys out to see what the final lineup is. And Mike says here, the baseball shocks just keep coming, losing to Bryant. Then Bryant was a tournament team last year, right? They're a good team.
38 wins. I think they had 36 wins at least.
Yeah. And they brought most of their players back to this year's team. So Bryant, that to me wasn't a bad loss, right? Especially for a team that's still trying to figure itself out. And I agree with you. Dylan King had an all-time game in game 3. I mean, there wasn't much he couldn't hit. And, this team, the difference between this team is last year's team defensively, they had errors. This year's defense seems a lot more solid than what last year's defense was. And the pitching staff, I think, is better this year too. And yeah, I do think he's taken Sundin's catching position. I don't
know about that, because you got to be careful with that, because it's not that position especially in Sundin's involvement in it, is very much been the plan to be a rotation throughout the year because Dylan King is an excellent catcher. Sundin's an excellent catcher. They both have a good bat. And Dylan King is definitely showing how good his bat can be, which is great. But, Sundin, his main asset is his bat. And so I think the plan from the very beginning is that those two are going to be rotating at catcher, and that's what we're seeing. So we're seeing the plan laid out where Sundin is getting his due rest when the coaching staff feels it's appropriate to do so. And so that's what we really saw over the weekend, I think, is more about that than anybody stealing anybody's position, because they're both a huge asset to this team, whether they're catching or whether they're DHing or whatever. But I just on the defensive front, I think we have a true shortstop this year, especially defensively. Jimenez is the real deal at shortstop. He has had a couple of errors in the last week or so, but even those errors were really kind of those tough errors that would have been tough to execute anyways, and he kind of came close to executing the plays. He's just a spectacular defensive shortstop, and he is coming alive at the plate in certain moments as well. Not so much on Sunday, but I believe on Saturday he had a pretty good game. And so that he is a huge asset. He's a huge get for us. I think the two biggest pickups in the offseason was Ross in center field as a true leadoff hitter. And then Jimenez is he's just an unbelievable shortstop defensively. And so it's great to have that in your middle of your infield.
Well, and I think with Espinal too, I believe didn't he come from Chipola?
He might have been the one that came from Chipola. I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure he was the guy who came from Chipola, and Rich was raving about him then, and Jimenez. And, people forget our leadoff hitter.
He did, Espinal came from Chipola.
Yeah. He played at FSU. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Ross played at FSU. That's right.
Yeah.
His previous school was FSU.
Yeah, and if you look at the batting averages, obviously they're going to be volatile right now because it's still early in the season. But a lot of our hitters are 300 plus territory. So as much as I think it's less about hitting, it's more about leaving more on base. And what you saw that was different in Game 2 and Game 3, Rich had been talking about it earlier in the season too, and people like Lex Bodeker, Lex has like the highest strikeout average, right? But they were hitting for power and not hitting for the gaps. And I think Game 2, they hit for the gaps and they were moving guys because we were leaving a lot of guys on base. They were moving guys on base by hitting for the gaps. And then they got a little bit of confidence, after that loss on the first on Friday. And that translated into big wins and the power coming in. Williamson, another one, Williams, another one as well. And then,
you had it right, Williamson. Yeah, no, he's had some big hits in these games, and it's good to see him bounce back in such a huge way after a little bit of a lull there in that 3-game stretch where we had some losses strung together, but it just didn't seem to be able to find the bats in those losses. But man, the bats really woke up on Saturday and Sunday, and that bodes well when we got number 6 in the country in Florida coming into the John Iliono Park tomorrow. And so that game, 6:00 on Tuesday night, is going to be a huge game for us because we haven't lost to Florida in a few years in baseball, and they're number 6 in the country. They're as good as they always are, and we're going to have a guy in Smith on the mound starting tomorrow who's 90 plus 95 plus guy consistently. He's a flamethrower, and he's going to get his first start of the season tomorrow, and we're going to see what he can do up against some of the best one of the best lineups in the country. So it'll be interesting.
100% agree. Make sure that you're out there if you can be. Mike with the comments. I love the baseball comments. Is this the most talented baseball we've ever had?
I think we're going to have to just see how this season plays out in order to answer that question. We got a lot of talent on this team, though.
Well, we've had a lot of talent and major league players in the past teams too. So, it'll be that's a big question to answer right now. We're 3 deep at catcher, 6 deep at infield, 5 deep in the outfield, and like 8 deep in the pitching room. 100% agree. I think this team is set up for success if the bats can hit consistently, right?
And that's with 2 off seasons of recruiting for Rich Wallace. So I think the future is quite bright, and his place in that future of UCF baseball is quite secure.
All right. Let's Josh, if you can hang out for 1 second longer, I think we're ready for your stat of the week and Alan's oxymoronic stat of the week. And let's start with Alan. Alan, what's your oxymoronic stat of the week for this week, sir?
Yeah, so with getting a long snapper transfer, I wanted to, it's not something you see every day. Wanted to look, since the transfer portal started, how many special teams players have transferred into UCF. So that's punters, kickers, and long snappers. So it's sort of a quiz question, I guess, just to make it a little more interactive here. Can you guess how many we have received as incoming transfers that are either a punter, a kicker, or a long snapper, in addition to the long snapper that we just got? So how many additional outside of him?
I'm thinking it's 3 or 4. I know we got, I think there's at least 1 kicker and at least 1 punter.
In the portal, you're asking?
In the portal era. I'm going to go 4.
Correct. In the portal era. You said 4.
Yeah, I'm just gonna to have a different number than Josh, even though 4 was the number I was thinking. I'm just gonna say 5.
Okay.
I was gonna go 3, but Josh stuck his fingers up before I got to talk. So I'm going to say, well, I either go with 3 or 4 because I know it's not 2. So I'm going to go 3.
Okay, Roger, you are correct with 3. So the transfers are Gage King, who's our long snapper for the last couple of years, who transferred over from Arizona State. The place kicker was Riker Casey, who transferred over from Appalachian State. And then there was one other kicker. I don't really ever remember him playing or anything, but it was Garen Boniol, who transferred over from Louisiana Tech. So now with this recent long snapper, there's been a total of 4 special team transfers in the portal era.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's our 4th one.
Oh, what was that? Was that Cornholio? What was that?
I don't remember.
Never heard that name.
When you said that, my mind went, I am the great Cornholio. There it is, Josh. I will not. If you guys only listen to this show and you don't watch it, that's why you watch the show, because yeah, there you go. Josh has he's TP and his we won't finish that because we're a clean show. All right. All right. Thank you, Alan, for that. Josh, you're up next. What is your sometimes funny fact of the week?
So I'm going on about 45 hours total with 3 hours of sleep, and I didn't know how
your hair it's starting to like.
I know. Well, that was because of my great cornholio. So, and we're almost at 2 hours now. I'm a little shocked. I'm still here. I'm asleep minutes after we're off. So there are about 5 ways to cope. I look, if you only consistently get 3 hours of sleep a night, immediate effects are cognitive impairment. So that would be kind of the deep snapper thing earlier. We have decreased alertness. Mason only had about 2 hours of driving. It wasn't that bad. Oh, how do you cope with 3 hours of sleep over time? There's about 5 things. Name 3 things you can do. I've done all these today.
Take a nap? I don't know.
Mike has a good one on here. I don't know. Are we still considered a clean show if we say cocaine on the air? Oh, well, I guess I just said it. So there you go. But Mike says cocaine. He says that's what you do to stay awake.
Not on the list, but skiing could be part of it. What else?
I'd say sticking your head out the window. Are we talking about just in driving, or are we talking
No,
about
just generally. There's like five tips to cope with.
So I'm going to say you just gave a hint. I'm going to say get some fresh air.
Not actually on the list.
Go for a walk?
I could, we'll give wake up exercises.
Tim says, have children, a wife, a job, and a mortgage, and you can operate on 3 hours of sleep. And I can say, with the exception of the wife, because I'm no longer married, but I did have a wife, that 4 of us on the show can relate to that statement.
That's for sure.
No, definitely. I definitely think exercise is one of them.
Yep. Give me at least one more. I'll give you the rest.
Take a nap.
Jump in the swimming pool. I don't know.
Take a nap. Take short naps. Is actually that's is one of them.
Take a shower.
No, but that does work. But from what I found, obviously drink coffee, or some caffeine,
or Monster energy drinks work. I did that for a while.
Listen up the music. That was the 1 hour drive was all EDM and heavy metal. So did that. Did a little bit of walking around for exercise. Did that today. Didn't take the short nap that's happening after I have this conversation. And energy boosting foods. I want to dig into that because the burnt ends I ate at Theodore's in Springfield, Mass. Were not energy boosting. They're good.
Boy, we're going off the rails tonight in the comments. We're not. There's a certain epidemic that's across the United States. We are not advocating for any of these methods, but Tim says there's a fentanyl dealer somewhere.
Steady around here. So.
We are not advocating for cocaine or fentanyl use. In fact, just the opposite. That being said, Josh, all I can say is for me, most of the time when I was short on sleep, it was while I was driving. And so rolling down the window periodically, Monster energy drinks, and the short naps, especially, I would stop at if you guys don't drive, remember, I hate to make this serious, but when you're driving with a lack of sleep, it's like drinking, like being drunk, right? So I would pull off to the rest areas and catch a quick 15-20 minute nap. And no, you weren't. I know you were hoping for something else, but no.
I'm tired.
Catch a quick nap. So, all right, real quick, a couple of comments that had came here late. So Mike asks, do we lose Dawkins, or does our women's basketball coach get fired first? And that's Satya Messer, obviously. To me, I don't think Dawkins is getting fired. I think he's quote unquote retiring, or whatever, right? And so if by pure definition, I think Messer gets fired first, but I don't think Messer gets fired this year. So I think Dawkins leaves first, if that's what we're going to say.
Yeah, Coach Messer gets a full year with like a not devastated and hurt team to rectify what's going on. Yeah. And listen, it's against bottom dwellers, but they're starting to win when the team is a little more whole. So
you mean like healthy and not out for months at a time?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Mike also said, apparently based, I think we're going to have to enlist Mike as a researcher for us. He says, apparently based on current standings, UCF men's basketball will play Utah game 1 of the Big 12 tournament, then Kansas, then Arizona. Remember, Utah fired their head coach after our game. As another guy that we retired, so we have a shot at that one. Kansas, they've been on a downslope lately, so depending
still
on
a dangerous team in the tournament.
Well, 100%. I mean, it's Kansas, right? Yeah. So I'm not saying our chances are good, but there's a chance. And then Arizona, which we almost beat during the regular season. However, the team that played Arizona, I don't know if that's the same team that we have today.
Neither one of them are really. Arizona's gone like way skyrocketed up since we played them, and we have not done so.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Mike says they're actually a 15 seed. UCF is a 14, would be West Virginia, TCU, and then Texas Tech, which is far worse schedule.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know what he meant by that, but
I think he just means that the next two games matter. I think that's what he means.
Yeah. So I'd much rather
at least 14 seed to try to get that schedule that he described first, because Texas Tech, they're not going. Boy, they're a different team than we played them the first.
Well, I mean, we just played TCU. We're going to play West Virginia, and like Josh said, I don't have a lot of confidence that we win that game away. So I'd much rather. As crazy as it sounds, I'd much rather have Utah, Kansas, and Arizona, because I think we will at least win the Utah game, and we have a better shot at Kansas than I think. I don't know about Kansas versus TCU. That would be the one game that's a toss-up.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be able to talk about it next week on the show. I mean, obviously that lineup and probably most lineups in the conference tournament will be an opportunity at least one more quad 2 win and 2 more quad 1 wins. So, I mean, could it matter? I don't know. But that would kind of back up the thought process. If we were able to make it to the conference final, we might have a chance at getting an at-large.
It also depends on what the other teams that are around our rankings
do. Other bubbles, they get burst and all that stuff. Like, it's just there's a lot of what ifs in this season of what ifs for us.
All right. And with that, and on that note, Josh has made it the entire show on 3 hours of sleep. He has not hit his keyboard, but he's working his way towards that. So thank you guys for sticking with us. Please make sure to tell your friends, make sure you're retweeting, sharing, whatever. We want more of you to be part of the conversation. Thank you, Mike, Tim, and everybody for both viewing, listening, and more importantly, commenting with us. Trey Neal made a quick stop in here, and look out for the poll, because I'll be putting that out there. Make sure you're sharing that.
Awesome.
And wow. All right, Josh. And on that note, he's getting delirious.
That's true.
Have a great week, everybody, ahead. Go Knights and
charge on.
Now, do we have to drop that because we don't do it?
Because we don't do it exactly at the same time.
That could be a thing too. Oh God.